Hey, welcome back, Energy Physio. We just finished up with the I3 model, the injury incidents and incomplete mechanics, and we have successfully moved to incidents, to incomplete mechanics. We've resolved incomplete mechanics to the point where we now think it's safe to start doing some loading. This is where the L3 model really fits in and can create a very systematic, stepwise way to challenge the body in 3 different ways that look just like sport, right? So sport requires a lot. It requires you to be strong, it requires you to be fast, it requires you to be able to do all those things while breathing hard. And so there's a really good systematic way where we can get you there, and it looks like this. The L3 model, this stands for load, 3 different types of load. And so we're gonna call the first type of load true load. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's just adding pounds, right? So let's say we pick a number that we think is appropriate for your sport and we want to hit that target. We think, hey, for you to have good tissue resilience for the sport you're going to return to, you need to be able to handle this amount of load repeatedly for that to make sense. And so for the sake of this true load here, we're just going to say 100 pounds, right? I like to keep my number simple. But let's say, hey, you come in out of rehab and you start maybe like 40 or 50 pounds, but we work up to a true load of 100 pounds, and you've got good form over 10 reps. That's what we're always looking for, is good movement form. Now during true load, it's very easy to monitor restriction because we're moving slowly. We're going down in a stable position, coming up in a stable position, and so it's very easy to move and highlight movement mobility restrictions during this true load phase. And so during this, we're still able to kind of double back on some of our remaining incomplete mechanics and monitor our movement under a new training stimulus of load. And so we can now kind of jump into this prehab process where, hey, I can't hit this position. I'm going to do these couple of mobilizations to help me get there. Keep training. Once you can hit 100 pounds 10 times, remember these are just examples, we need to challenge that in another sport-specific way that increases the demand on the body, and that is a metabolic load, which is increasing heart rate and respiratory rate. So what this might look like is, hey, we did a back squat of 100 pound 10 times. Now we're going to row 500 meters as fast as you can, get the heart rate and respiratory rate jacked a mile high, and now we're going to come back at 70%, so 70 pounds, and do that 10 times. Now can you do that with good form? And the reason we're going to decrease this down is ideally we're going to train our true load well beyond what we're ever going to experience in sport. And if you can train your true load beyond that, we should be able to come in at a percentage of that under these other stressors and maintain good movement and still be very sport specific without getting really out of hand. So we're doing things to get the heart rate and respiratory rate really high, because we know when people are breathing hard and the heart rate's really high, people just have a harder time moving well. And so if we can train that in a very controlled environment, then it becomes easier to translate to the field, the court, whatever, right? So true load has to happen first to develop tissue tolerance and resiliency. Metabolic load has to happen second, because you have to be conditioned to be able to handle the next one, which is speed load, and you have to have a certain level of conditioning to be able to move true load with good form while your heart rate and respiratory rate are very high. And so the next one is neurological load. And I call this a neurological load, which is incorporated through speed, and it has to be added last because it incorporates all 3. If you increase the speed of any activity, it increases true load. It adds more force and stress through the joints, the muscles, the tendons. But just by the nature of doing something faster, it makes you breathe harder and it makes your heart rate increase. And so this one right here challenges both of these. And so you can't add speed first without a basic foundation of tissue tolerance and cardiorespiratory conditioning, unless you probably want to get hurt sooner than later. Right? So now this could be adding speed in the form of just doing a movement faster. Like, hey, we rode to 200, now we're at 70%, 60%, and I want you to do 10 reps in under 20 seconds. So that means you got to be moving pretty fast, and just that increase in pace requires the neurological system to fire at a much higher rate and control your movement much more efficiently. Or this could be a movement that requires speed. So just changing the speed at which you move is much different than a movement actually requiring you to generate speed. That'd be something like an Olympic lift, a power clean, a snatch, a clean and jerk. Those things require you to generate speed to get the bar moving so that you can also generate speed in your body to get under the bar. And so this is much different. And this challenges all three, but it also challenges your body in a way to, like, this is the pinnacle of highlighting movement and mobility restrictions. Changing direction very quickly will highlight any limitations you have in your joints and in your muscles really easily. So this is kind of the pinnacle of being able to understand where your prehab routine should be by being able to maximize mobility and maximize movement control and positions through movements with speed. All right, so you were injured or you had pain. We went up here to this incomplete mechanics model. We resolve those to a point where we think now it's safe to start some strength and conditioning and loading in a way that makes sense. And that way is true load first, meet some criteria, add in some metabolic stress. Meet some criteria, add in a neurological load that challenges all three, and then when you meet your criteria here, now you can move here. And there's nothing left. You've done everything in a way that makes total sense. You've been safe. You continue to prehab through the process. Now you can return to sport with complete confidence because you've been doing movements that are hard and suck and make you work just like sport, and you've been doing those for however long and doing them well. Now there's no concern about returning to sport or having to go back gradually. You just go. All right? So here's the rule for return to sport. Go. There's no such thing as a slow return. You're playing or you're not. But if you go through this stepwise process to get here, I can assure you that when you get here, you're ready, your confidence is high, you're not worried about moving in ways that are going to get you injured or ending back up over here. If you do the slow return to sport, hey, your pain's gone. With slow return to sport, I can almost guarantee you're going to end back up here or here. And we don't want that for you. So I hope that gives you a little clear-cut pathway on what this should look like, what you should be resolving, how you should be resolving it, in a way you can systematically stress your body in a way that allows you to get back to sport in a safe way that minimizes risk of injury, at the same time helping you get out of your previous one. See you later.